Hello and welcome to the review of the day, which is for the Santaroga Barrier by Frank Herbert. Yes indeed, it is that Frank Herbert. So, Frank Herbert, as we all know, I'm sure, wrote Dune. And while I know it's fashionable to criticize Dune, go, oh, it isn't that great a book, I happen to disagree. I love Dune. I've read it many times. I've even read some of the sequels, though not all of them. I think I stopped after Children of Dune or Dune Emperor or something. Anyway, Herbert is much more than just the author of Dune. And I think that the fame of that series, while it's deserved in many respects, has actually done him a bit of a disservice in some ways. He's an excellent, skilled writer. And many of his other books deserve a lot more attention than they get. They all get sort of subsumed by the spice. Thus, I was delighted to come across this book, which I had not heard of, and which is in really good condition, making me think that it came out of someone's personal collection. There are no prices, there are no stickers, there are no symptoms of it having been too long on the shelf. It's still bendy, you see. There's no symptom of it having suffered from the extreme heat of our environment, because the spine is supple and it doesn't look like it's warped from the extreme humidity that we get on a fairly regular basis. So it's this great little Now from 1968, and that lovely cover art is not credited on the book, but I have a fairly high level of confidence that it was done by Jan Parker. It's just gorgeous. Just look at that. So the story starts with Gilbert Dason, I'm going to go with Dason, who has accepted a commission to do a market research trip to Santaroga, not Santa Rosa. I mispronounced this so much, never mind. Anyway, the commission has been offered to him through his university mentor, who we gather that he did his psychology degree under. It's American, so they call it school, and can I just say right now that to an Australian ears, calling university a school is odd, but I'm used to it by now. And this story starts with Gilbert as he's driving his Ford camper van into the valley in which Santaroga is nestled. He writes down some preliminary notes about how it all looks like a normal, prosperous farming community, but even there, right from the start, in the first couple of pages, Herbert lets us know that there's an edge to Gilbert's mission. Two previous investigators hired by the same group have met with fatal accidents, while engaged in the same project, and the author clearly lets us know that Gilbert would never have accepted the project at all if his sweetheart Uni was not from Santaroga, Jenny, who he has not seen nor heard from since graduation, and we learn how that came about later. It's very relevant to the story. Now, this is not the kind of traditional SF story one might expect from the author of Dune, The Dosadi Experiment, or The Eyes of Heisenberg, which for many years was my favourite Herbert, but I haven't reread recently. Those are all great Herbert books, and they are all very firmly science fiction. But this one is far more in the speculative fiction region. It is subtle. There are no spaceships, nor aliens, nor dinosaurs. What it is instead is a slow creep of a mystery with definite lashings of horror, I would say. There's clearly an uncanny mystery to Santaroga, which is hinted at very slowly, and this reveal is very slow indeed. It's great reading to me, but it's definitely a creeper of a novel, and I can see a lot of people being dissatisfied with the slow pace of the start. That slow pace very much is the way that you set up Gilbert himself, the entire town, and very subtly Herbert keeps giving you all these small weirdnesses until you have the hairs in the back of your neck are sort of standing up because something is so very wrong. Gilbert's are too, and Gilbert's hairs on the back of his neck are quite right. Okay, so without spoilers, until I warn you, Gilbert arrives in town. He's received with that surly distrust that is almost a prototype for small towns, and the attitude towards outsiders. But at the same time, as soon as his name is dropped, most people instantly associate him with Jenny. So he books into the inn where he's treated with this surly dislike and distrust, where the innkeeper says, I hope you're only staying for one night, where there's a clear lack of welcome or helpfulness. Then he goes into the restaurant of the inn, and the guy who's serving him sees his name and says, oh, Jenny's young man. He's been in town for like 10 minutes. And this response becomes a common response as he goes throughout town the next few days. And it is definitely eerie to Gilbert, who presents it as eerie to us, the readers. Because Gilbert hasn't spoken to her for over a year. She doesn't know he's coming, and no one else should either, and yet. So these coincidences and these strange, not strange type incidents keep mounting up. So strange, not strange. As one of the people who employed Gilbert mentioned, it's not entirely remarkable to find that Santaroga has not one single reported case of mental illness. There are other towns with that. It's not unique that it has no reported juvenile delinquency at all, because apparently back in the 60s, there were occasional towns that were similar. It's not inexplicable that all the tobacco cigarette sales in that town could be accounted for by passers-by, but add all these things and many other small facts together, and you have all these anomalies with no explanation, and that means that there's a curiosity about the town and something is clearly going on. So that very night, after quite a bit is done for us in that first night, as he talks to the waiter, who also started out his life as an outsider, but is now fully Santarogan. When Gilbert goes up to his room that night, he is subject to an accident, a non-fatal but could have been accident. He survives, but that brings him into the sphere of Dr. Piergat, who is also Jenny's uncle, and then, of course, on to Jenny. Now, without spoilers, I can say that I really enjoyed this book and its slow building of suspense. I'm going to say that slow building at the start, like for the first half, maybe 2/3, it's glacial, but I enjoyed it anyway, because I enjoy Herbert's writing, and I enjoyed the feeling of, well, because I read so much science fiction, that New English Library, it's clearly published it as a science fiction book, but no books. No books. No. But it was a bit unusual in my recent reading in that it could have been science fiction, or it could just be a thriller. There could be something happening, but it could be entirely canny. It could just be a thing that people are doing. Is it or isn't it? We don't know. Well, we know because we read the back of the book and it's a science fiction book. But hey, Gilbert doesn't know. Now, it's no secret that Frank Herbert was eternally fascinated by a few themes which appear and reappear in many of his works. His speculation of the possibilities of mind-altering substances was not unique for the period in which he was writing, neither was his fascination in psychic abilities and group dynamic and a group subconscious, and the possibilities of the psychedelics and group subconscious as means of, I guess, pack communication. All of these themes can be found in subtle ways through the book, but often they will appear in ways that you wouldn't expect, even if you read a lot of other Herbert and lots of other books from the era that were fascinated by LSD and wee Timmy Leary flying through the sky and all the rest of it. Another thing Frank Herbert really liked is he liked using science fiction to explore complicated ideas and theories about very diverse topics. That appeals to the omnivorous reader in me. Among the topics that he loved were psychology, politics, ecology, and evolution, all of which have elements in this book. He had interesting and complex political views. So he's often described as Republican and conservative, and I'm not sure how those two work together, but the conservative, I can see how he's playing with conservative notions in this book, and he was an environmentalist before that was even really a word. Again, you can see elements of that in this book. Again, nothing that you would expect. If I said this book is environmental and conservative, any take-home messages you would get from that does not really relate to the Santaroga experience. So he also allegedly had a certain distaste for the way governments lie to achieve power and the way business practices base a lot of their economic campaigning on military campaigning, even using the same wording. I'm pretty sure he does that in other stories. I can't pinpoint them in my mind off the top of my head. And he definitely talks about this here. Now, his science background pops up in small ways, such as when Gilbert has describing the valley. You've got a lot of environmental terms. And later on, a small home laboratory appears, and it has a microtome, which is dear to my histologist heart. Now, at this point, I'm going to stop trying to be spoilery. I'm not going to do any big reveals that would definitely spoiler what happens in this book. I don't think that's fair. There aren't any really strong reveals in the description that the book gives you. And searching online, there's actually very few reviews or descriptions of this book, and many of them are not what you'd call entirely accurate. So I'm going to leave the Santaroga Barrier to be revealed to anyone who chooses to read it. And if you like Frank Herbert's writing, I think you should consider reading it at least. So, some spoilers ahead. If you think you might read this book, maybe stop and come back later. I mostly love this story, but Gilbert does some odd things. Early on, he breaks into the caves where the Santaroga co-op matures its cheeses, knowing that he can't get out the same way while he's doing it. I can see that as a narrative requirement, so I didn't mind it, even though I would normally be exceptionally critical about people behaving stupidly. I don't like my characters behaving stupidly in books. It annoys me unless you can give me a reason. Here, the narrative is its own reason, and while I did roll my eye once or twice, I didn't strain myself doing it. And the major part of this book is Gilbert struggling with Santaroga's special element. There's a slow reveal for Gilbert, a slow reveal for his experiences of Santaroga. It's not quite as slow for the reader because we've got that overview, the separation overview thingy. The physical element to the real Santaroga food products, which are referred to as jaspers, and you will find that in Wikipedia. We know that something about that has got to be part of the Santaroga variation. It is revealed that all the letters Gilbert wrote to Jenny throughout the year were never received because they think that the post office biddies would have gotten rid of them because she was interested in an outsider. Jenny herself is warm, welcoming, still loves him desperately and is desperate for him to stay, but wasn't desperate enough for her to do anything about it before leaving university. And I have to say that Gilbert and Jenny as a couple only work as a narrative tool. As a relationship, they are wholly unbelievable, and their connection is minimal and unlikely. But this story isn't really about a love affair. It's about Gilbert struggling to retain his identity against this overwhelming social pressure, against Jenny being held out as an option, a job that's being held out as an option, and this slow social drug psychological element that keeps trying to absorb him into Santaroga. Now, as I mentioned, a slow build-up. For the first half, we basically follow Gilbert around as he discovers more and more anomalies. Where are all the children? Why potentially fatal accidents keep happening to him all the time, and they're obviously some of them not premeditated. What happens to people when Jaspers doesn't work on them? Sinister overtones. What will happen to him if Jaspers doesn't work on him? Even more sinister overtones. What is this job that Dr. Piaget keeps wanting to offer him but never describes? Now, for me as a reader, I did at times get a little impatient with how little was ever being asked directly that could have been asked, or revealed that should have been revealed. Asking Jenny or Uncle Larry for information about the town would have been sensible, and while the slow build-up of tension for Gilbert doing it the hard way was okay, it was occasionally a bit much. Now, I was still enjoying it overall. There was never any question of me not continuing, but it was a slow read because it wasn't that ongoing dynamic. Now, around about the last third, things became fast-paced. All the information that Herbert had carefully built up, all the details that he'd slowly trickled and given to you bit by bit, all of a sudden went kaboom, and you went straight forward with the narrative. And I really enjoyed that. Gilbert becomes more assertive and less of wishy-washy, which was also a bit of a relief. And from then on, it became a fully engrossing read. And I think the slow build-up made that part even more fascinating when the pace picked up. If you can enjoy that slow build-up, it's worth it. The ending was purely creepy and immensely satisfying. Immensely satisfying and weird, and not the sort of ending that people would write in the 2020s, I'm going to say. So, The Santaroga Barrier by Frank Herbert. Definitely do recommend this beautiful old book, and I definitely do recommend reading it. It's a good book. We should all read good books. So thank you for watching this. I'm going to go away and read my next good book, which I am so looking forward to. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time, and I finally have it. Have a great day. Go to the beach. Read good books.